The autumn air of 1967 carried the scent of change through the narrow streets of Oakland's Chinatown. Golden afternoon light filtered through the single window of a modest second-floor gymnasium, casting long shadows across worn wooden floorboards that had witnessed countless hours of training. The smell of sandalwood incense drifted from a small altar in the corner, mixing with the honest scent of sweat and dedication. This was Bruce Lee's sanctuary, a humble space where revolutionary ideas about combat were being born far from the glittering lights of Hollywood. Bruce was in the middle of a private lesson with Tommy Chen, a 19-year-old college student who had been training for 8 months. Tommy's movements were becoming sharper, more fluid, as he practiced the intercepting techniques that would later become famous worldwide. Neither of them could have imagined that, within the next few minutes, they would become part of a confrontation that would echo through martial arts history for decades to come. The door burst open with a violence that made Tommy stumble backward in surprise. 4 figures filled the narrow doorway, their combined mass seeming to block out all light from the hallway. At the front stood Joe Louis, the national karate champion, whose name struck fear into competitors across America. At 6 feet 2 inches and 200 pounds of sculpted muscle, Louis had accumulated over 50 victories in official competition. His face wore the confident smirk of a man who had never truly known defeat, and his eyes carried the dangerous gleam of wounded pride seeking redemption. But Joe Louis had not come alone. Behind him stood 3 of the most formidable karate practitioners in the country. Frank Thompson, the East Coast heavyweight champion, towered at 6 feet 4 inches, his 230 pounds of raw power having delivered 45 consecutive victories. His hands, scarred from years of makiwara training, hung like sledgehammers at his sides. Richard the Hammer Hayes had earned his nickname by breaking baseball bats with his devastating shin kicks, a feat that had become legendary in tournament circles. Victor Tanaka, a 4th-degree black belt in traditional represented the purest form of classical karate, refined through 20 years of unwavering discipline. 4 giants stood facing one Chinese instructor of modest stature. The contrast was almost absurd. Tommy Chen pressed himself against the wall, his heart pounding as he recognized the faces. From martial arts magazines, if you want to discover how Bruce Lee faced 4 of the most dangerous fighters in America simultaneously, and taught them a lesson none of them would ever forget. Stay until the end of this story. You won't regret it. Joe Louis stepped forward, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. "Bruce Lee," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of challenge. "We heard you were teaching here. Thought we'd come see what all the fuss is about." Bruce stood perfectly still, his dark eyes moving calmly from one intruder to the next, assessing, calculating, but showing no trace of fear. His bare torso gleamed with a light sheen of sweat, revealing musculature that was compact and defined, designed for explosive speed rather than bulk. "Joe," Bruce said, his voice calm as still water, "it's been a while. I see you've brought friends." Frank Thompson cracked his knuckles, the sound sharp in the tense silence. "We've been hearing a lot about this Jeet Kune Do of yours. Talk about how traditional martial arts are inferior. Figured we'd see if you could back it up." Richard Hayes laughed harshly. "Look at the size of him. This is the guy everyone's afraid of. I've seen bigger high school wrestlers." Victor Tanaka remained silent, but his eyes were sharp, analytical. Of the 4, he seemed the most cautious, perhaps sensing something the others were too arrogant to perceive. Bruce turned to Tommy, his voice gentle but firm. "Tommy, we'll end today's lesson early. Go home." Tommy hesitated, torn between fear and loyalty. "Sifu, should I call the police?" Bruce smiled, and something in that smile made even Joe Louis's confidence waver for a fraction of a second. "That won't be necessary. These gentlemen are here to learn. They just don't know it yet." Tommy gathered his things and slipped past the 4 fighters. The door closed, and the gymnasium felt smaller, the air thicker with anticipation. Joe crossed his arms over his massive chest. "Let's cut the philosophical nonsense. Bruce, last time we sparred, you got lucky. I've been telling everyone that Kung Fu is just dancing with fancy hand movements. These 3 champions agree. We came to prove it." Bruce walked slowly to a small table near the window, where a ceramic teapot sat on a warming plate. With ceremonial movements, he poured 5 cups of tea. "Please," he said, gesturing to the cups, "have some tea first. Whatever happens next, there's no reason we can't be civilized." Frank slapped the nearest cup off the table, sending it shattering against the wall. "We didn't come here for tea, little man. We came to expose you as the fraud you are." Bruce watched the tea drip down the brick wall, his expression unchanged. That cup was a gift from IP Man himself. "Let me show your students something about real power," Frank declared. He positioned a wooden board between two blocks and with a thunderous kai drove his fist through it. The wood splintered with a satisfying crack. Bruce examined a broken piece thoughtfully. "Impressive. Your conditioning is excellent. But I have a question. Can you hit something that moves? Something that doesn't wait patiently for your fist to arrive?" Richard Hayes stepped forward, his famous legs coiled with potential energy. "Are you calling us slow? Do you have any idea how many people these legs have put in the hospital?" "I'm asking a question," Bruce replied. "In competition, you face opponents who fight within expected patterns. What happens when the target doesn't follow the rules?" Victor Tanaka spoke for the first time, his voice measured and precise. "You claim to have created something superior to systems refined over centuries. That's either genius or arrogance." "It's neither," Bruce said. "It's simply asking different questions. You've spent years mastering forms, predetermined responses. I'm interested in what happens in the space between intention and action. What happens when there is no form?" Joe had heard enough. "Words. Always words with you, Bruce. 4 of us, 1 of you. Still feel confident with your philosophy?" Bruce's lips curved into that enigmatic smile. "Numbers mean nothing if you cannot touch me." He removed his shirt, revealing his legendary physique in full. Every muscle was visible beneath his skin, not bulky like the karate men, but carved with an efficiency that spoke of explosive potential. He moved to the center of the room, 1 at a time or all together. Your choice. Frank Thompson didn't wait for discussion. With a roar that seemed to shake the walls, he launched himself at Bruce, his massive fist cutting through air in a haymaker that had ended dozens of fights. His fist met nothing but empty space. Bruce had simply ceased to exist in one location and materialized in another, like smoke dispersing in wind. Before Frank could recover from his missed strike, he felt 3 distinct pressures. Light as feathers, but precise as surgical instruments, touching his throat, solar plexus, and floating ribs. "You're dead 3 times, Bruce said simply. Frank spun around, face flushed with anger. He launched a combination jab, cross, hook. Each blow delivered with championship power. Each blow found nothing but air. Bruce flowed around the attacks like water around stones, never rushed, never desperate, simply not where the fists were traveling. Richard Hayes stepped forward. "Let me try those legs of yours, little man." His right shin rose in the kick that had broken baseball bats. Bruce shifted at an impossible angle. Richard's legendary shin cut through empty space. Before he could retract his leg, Bruce's index finger rested gently against his exposed throat. "The leg is powerful," Bruce observed, "but committed. Once you throw it, you cannot take it back. And you always announce it. Your hip shifts first. Your eyes focus on the target. By the time your leg moves, I already know where it's going." Richard stumbled backward, his face pale. In 20 years of fighting, no one had ever read him so easily. Victor Tanaka approached with more caution. His movements were textbook Shotokan, precise and powerful. He launched traditional combinations, techniques refined over centuries of Japanese martial tradition. Bruce intercepted each one, not blocked, not evaded, but intercepted, meeting attacks at their point of origin, disrupting power before it could develop. "You telegraph everything," Bruce said, and there was no mockery in his voice, only the tone of a teacher explaining a fundamental truth. Every technique begins with preparation. That preparation is a message. I simply read the message before the technique arrives. Without verbal coordination, Frank, Richard, and Victor attacked simultaneously. The gymnasium erupted in chaos. 3 skilled practitioners unleashing everything against a single target. For 30 seconds, that felt like hours. Bruce Lee demonstrated what would become legend. He moved through the storm of fists and kicks like a ghost through walls, never quite where the attacks expected him to be. He used the attackers against each other, slipping aside so that Frank's punch nearly hit Victor, shifting so that Richard's kick forced Victor to dive away. The 3 champions were exhausting themselves while Bruce expended no effort at all. When it ended, Frank, Richard, and Victor stood bent over, gasping for breath. Their uniforms were drenched with sweat. Not one had managed to touch Bruce Lee. Joe Louis had watched the entire display without moving. His expression had transformed from confident smugness through disbelief to something that looked almost like awe. "Your turn," Joe Bruce said, breathing perfectly normal, as if he had been standing still the entire time. "Show them why you're the champion." Joe attacked with everything he had. He was faster than his companions, more experienced, more cunning. He feinted, combined, used angles and timing that had defeated every opponent he had ever faced. His fists moved like lightning. None of it mattered. Bruce stepped inside Joe's guard and placed his palm flat against the champion's chest. "Do you feel that?" Bruce asked. "This is called the 1-inch punch. It's not about muscular strength. It's about focusing every ounce of energy through a single point." Bruce's palm moved. The movement was almost invisible, a small pulsation that seemed insignificant. But the effect was extraordinary. Joe Louis flew backward as if struck by a vehicle. His body lifted from the floor, sailed through air, and crashed against the wall hard enough to crack plaster. The three champions stood frozen in shock. They had seen Joe take full power kicks without flinching. Now he had been launched across a room by what appeared to be a gentle push. Joe slid down the wall, gasping for breath. It took nearly a minute to struggle back to his feet. The silence that followed was profound. Dust motes floated in the golden light, disturbed by the violence that had just passed. Frank Thompson spoke first, his voice hoarse. "I've trained for 20 years. I thought I understood combat. I understood nothing." Victor Tanaka lowered himself to his knees, bowing deeply. "I came here blinded by pride. I see now that I've been learning the surface while missing the depth." Richard Hayes simply shook his head slowly. "Can you teach us? Whatever that was, can you teach us?" Joe Louis remained against the wall, his chest still aching from the impact. "I came to prove you were a fraud," he said finally, his voice rough. "I brought 3 champions because I thought numbers would expose your tricks. Instead, you proved that I know nothing, that we all know nothing." Bruce walked over and extended his hand. "Knowing that you know nothing is not defeat. It's the beginning of wisdom. Empty your cup, and it can be filled with something new." Joe took the offered hand and allowed Bruce to help him stand. "Will you teach us?" Bruce looked at the 4 men who had come to destroy him, and now stood asking to learn. "The door is open to those who seek with sincerity. But understand this, what I teach will require you to unlearn much of what you believe. You must become like water, shapeless, adaptable, flowing into every crack." In the months that followed, all 4 champions became Bruce Lee's students. They trained alongside his other pupils, receiving no special treatment. Frank Thompson learned that his raw power could be refined into something far more efficient. Richard Hayes discovered that his legendary legs could become even more dangerous when freed from predictable patterns. Victor Tanaka found that his traditional training was not wasted, but could be transformed into something more fluid and responsive. And Joe Louis became one of Bruce Lee's most dedicated students, eventually revolutionizing his own approach to combat. Years later, he would credit Bruce with transforming not just his fighting ability, but his understanding of what martial arts truly meant. The lesson that autumn afternoon transcended technique. It revealed the truth that applies far beyond any gymnasium. True strength is found not in overwhelming force, but in adaptability, in the humility to recognize that there is always more to learn. The greatest victory is not the opponent defeated, but the mind opened. If this story inspired you and made you reflect on the importance of humility and continuous learning, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that true mastery is a journey, not a destination. Comment below, what would you do if 4 champions challenged everything you believed in?